Emotional dysregulation. Have you ever seen a storm chaser? Maybe on television. There are people that actually document storms, tornadoes, and things like that. And so they'll go out of their way to actually find the things that most of us would run away from. So in most cases, you and I would be afraid to go near a tornado. A storm chaser will actually be going towards a tornado. But what you notice about them is they're calm, even excited when it comes to going toward a storm. They're not dysregulated like you or I would be. They're not upset or angry or screaming. They're not afraid and frightened. But there are different situations and scenarios where we notice people can be this way, like firefighters going in to fight a fire. They don't seem to be especially afraid. Police officers are going into high crime situations, but they display bravery. Um, a professional boxer will step into the ring against an opponent, 200 pounds. That's a killing machine. And many of us being faced with a fist fight would be a dysregulating situation. But for these professionals, they're able to walk into these situations and seemingly stay calm. So, what is their secret to staying calm? And more so, how can we actually be someone who's able to remain calm when we feel triggered or when there's something that's dysregulating us or our emotions feel like they're getting out of control? For these professionals, they have training and they have practice through their training. So their training goes through drills where they over and over again practice these scenarios. What would we do? How would we handle ourselves? This gives them a knowledge base that they can rely on, that they can fall back on, that will help them to stay calm in this situation. Also, their training and their practice helps them to train their subconscious so that they have the instincts needed so that they know exactly how to move in any given situation. Have you ever met someone who's calm in a somewhat trialsome situation? A person who's able to just remain baseline, they seem to keep their peace no matter what's happening around them. You meet a person like that and it's downright inspiring. And you think, wow, I would love to be like that. I would love to just be able to stay calm. And you might even be someone who says, but I can't do that. But is that accurate? Is it really true that you cannot be a person who learns the skills of staying calm? Well, just like the professionals train to remain regulated, you can train to remain regulated as well. It's a skill. Emotional regulation is a skill. It's relying on a set of trained reactions, trained skills that you have. And so that you have the knowledge going into the situation, you have the skills going into the situation, you can avoid becoming overly dysregulated. You can actually remain a person with peace. But that's not easy for those of us who have trauma. Emotional dysregulation refers to difficulties in controlling or regulating one's emotional state and their responses. So it's like riding a roller coaster without knowing when the next drop is going to be, when the next loop is going to be. You feel like things are just out of control once they start to go down that path. And so you can have intense mood swings. You can find yourself having outbursts. You can have anger or crying spells that are seemingly out of proportion with the actual situation. So when you feel like you're having spells and emotions that are out of proportion with the actual situation, that would be emotional dysregulation. One client said when she feels like she's low and she's not feeling well, she feels like she'll never get out of it. She doesn't see an end to the despair. And she said also, though, when she's feeling up, when she's on her highs, which she called mania, she doesn't like it because although she feels good, she also feels equally out of control. She doesn't feel like she's actually controlling her emotions. Instead, she feels like a person in a roller coaster car. You're not in control. It's just going without you. Understanding the root causes of emotional dysregulation is helpful, but it's not the key to fixing it. but it's helpful. Ultimately, it's going to stem down to trauma. Your difficulty regulating your emotion is a developmental arrest. And developmental arrest occurs because of trauma, usually early in life, early in your young adulthood, or as a young child. You had chronic stress that you had to deal with. You had a household that was unstable or unstable caregivers. And then that contributes to difficulties in your ability to manage and regulate yourself later in life. Put short, you haven't developed the skills. So how would you know? They don't come naturally to you. So even if you have the head knowledge, the instincts aren't trained to be able to handle things that are throwing you out of alignment or dysregulating, things that are triggering you. But of course, emotional dysregulation is not a laughing matter. It can negatively impact our relationships. So something happens like they were supposed to meet you at dinner and then they weren't there. Then the next time you see them, now I don't want to talk to you anymore, or you want to end the relationship, or you want to kick them out, or you are packing your bag so that you can leave. And all of this is a dysregulated response, not proportional to the actual situation. And as a result, you're actually going to create more trauma and it becomes a bigger cycle. And by the way, you can actually be guilty of emotionally abusing or neglecting the other person because you're not able to regulate your own emotions. It can impact our work and our career if we find ourselves snapping, not being able to control our responses. It can impact our academic well-being and success. It can have an impact on our overall quality of life. So we don't want to be in a situation where we feel like we're making a fool of ourselves. And further, we don't want to, even if it's just happening to us in private, we don't want to feel like we can't control our emotions, because then we feel like we're losing our life or losing our time in our life. And being out of control is just not the place we want to be when it comes to our being, when it comes to ourself. So how do we do this? How do we learn to cope, to actually be able to control the emotions? Well, it's important to understand what emotions really are. And so in your notes, be sure to take down this information, because the head knowledge helps us to be able to apply it in terms of heart knowledge. So you have to understand that emotions are not your leader. They are not your God. And even though they're very powerful, they are actually not to be followed. So you may have learned false notions such as follow your heart, or your intuition will guide you, or you just got to follow your gut. Your gut tells you what's right. Those are all false notions. They're false beliefs. If you follow those beliefs, you will be following your emotions, your feelings, your impulses, instead of leading them. The emotions are important. They do need to be consulted. They do need to be considered, even listened to, but not obeyed. You are not to obey your emotions. So make sure your notes reflect that emotions are a communication from the subconscious mind. And who are they communicating to? They're communicating to you, the conscious self, because you are actually a separate being than your subconscious mind. Emotions are a communication from the subconscious mind to the conscious self of what? It's telling you how you perceive, or how your subconscious is perceiving that reality is interacting with its values, your values. Again, your emotions are a communication from the subconscious mind to the conscious self as to how it is perceiving reality is interacting with the values. So when I say your subconscious mind, I'm talking about your brain. It's a computer system, right? And it's got to communicate to you, the conscious person, the person who was smart enough today to say, let me turn on this broadcast, go to this healing meeting, and help myself to grow. That person's the conscious person. That's your wisest self. That person almost always makes good decisions. The subconscious is where the emotional self is, the impulses, the fight, flight, freeze, fawn. It's automatic, it's immediate, it responds quickly, and it's the default. So whenever you're not consciously controlling yourself or your body, your subconscious takes over. It's a default. It's like a backup engine. So it's like when you're not running it or controlling it, boop, it goes into the autopilot. You've experienced this when you're driving a car and then you tune out and then you can find yourself all the way home. When you walk, a lot of times you don't have to think about walking, do you? You're not like one foot in front of the other, right foot, left foot. No. Once you've done it enough, you trained the subconscious mind. So the subconscious actually handles walking for you. Some of you can walk and chew gum at the same time. You can walk and listen to music or be thinking or have a conversation. And you're able to manage all these multiple processes because the subconscious mind is a supercomputer that gets trained to do something that you do often. Keep that in mind, by the way, because we're going to need that for when we want to train it to be emotionally regulated. So it communicates to you, the conscious person, when it's an automated system that your emotions run on, it automatically is perceiving every piece of data, every situation around you. It's perceiving, does this align with our values? When something aligns with your values, it drops serotonin, oxytocin, all dopamine, all the good chemicals that feel really good into your system. That's what gets dropped in. Whenever your subconscious perceives that something in your reality is aligning with your values, that's when you get good feelings. Give you, for instance, if there's a type of man that you really, really like, he's like to you, you really value these qualities. Maybe you value big, strong, tall, and he is these things. Maybe you value a man with a beard or a deep voice. Maybe you value a man with a lot of money. Whatever it is about this guy, maybe it's because he has a motorcycle, okay? But if in your subconscious, that's a value to you, if that man looks at you and says to you, hey, you're pretty, or you're beautiful, or I'd like to go out with you sometime, you might get a rush of positive emotions, serotonin, oxytocin, dopamine dropping into your system. Why does it feel good? Why does it feel good to get attention from a guy that you value? Because you value him. Your subconscious perceives that your reality is aligning with your values. If you value money, you look in your bank account and it's twice as much as what you thought it was. And then you realize, oh yeah, I saved some money and I got a deposit here and I'm richer than I thought. You may actually get positive feelings and emotions. You might have a good day today, a better day. And what you're saying is a good day is you're feeling good because your subconscious perceives that your reality is aligned with your values. Does that make sense? In like fashion, when your subconscious perceives that something is out of alignment with your values or violating your values, then it's going to drop unpleasant sensations. You're getting chemicals, cortisol, right? You might get adrenaline, right? These are painful chemicals and emotions that we start to feel inside of us. It doesn't feel good when we get too much of these chemicals. These chemicals are being released by what? Because you were born with a chemical imbalance? No. You're getting these chemicals released mainly because your subconscious mind is perceiving that something in your reality is violating your values. So then you're going to feel sadness, anger, irritation, anxiety. And you're going to say, I feel terrible. This is a terrible day. I don't feel good. Why don't you feel good? Get it? It's a communication. Subconscious perceives something's misaligned with the values. It's violating the values. That's what your emotions are. It's a really sophisticated system and it runs automatically. Because it runs automatically, we say, because we feel like, I can't control this. I can't control my emotions. And it's not totally wrong because, well, you weren't the one who created the emotion. Your computer system did. So because it's on an automated system, it feels out of control. You were just minding your own business, and all of a sudden, oh, I feel bad, I feel sad, I feel upset. But remember, it's all just a subconscious computer system. So when a computer does something that you don't like, let's just say in the real world, like your phone, your computer, those things have a lot of automated functions too, right? So what do you do when they do things that you don't like? Do you just sit there and say, I can't control this, it's a computer? I think a lot of times when your computers do something you don't like, you look for access points, something you can do to fix the situation, right? If your computer starts to malfunction, you may look to reboot it. If it's a program that needs to be closed because it's freezing, you're going to close the program. You might clear space on your computer. You're going to take certain actions where you have control, even though the computer system has so many of these functions automated. Does that make sense? So you don't just say, oh, because it's automated, I can't control my phone, I can't control my computer. That's silly, because the phone and the computer is made for you to control. The manufacturer made it for that. The manufacturer also made your subconscious mind for you to be subordinate to you, to be under your control. So even though it runs things automatically, and we're so grateful so that I don't have to go around perceiving if everything aligns with my values every single time, I'm glad my subconscious just does it automatically. It helps. And then that's what we call our intuition. And that's why we're like, my intuition is right on the money. Well, yeah, it's a computer system. It knows your values. If something doesn't align with your values, then it tells you. And you go, it's a magical intuition. It's not magical, it's science. It's quite miraculous, but it's a computer system. So I want you to look at it that way. And yes, it's automated. But no, you're not totally out of control. You have to look for the access points for how you can gain control again. So let's take the situation where I'm out at a restaurant and someone makes a disparaging remark toward me. Maybe it's towards my gender or something else about me, maybe my weight or something. And I don't like what they said. Okay. Do I have to become emotionally dysregulated? Many of you have observed that you have the ability to not cry in front of people. If you don't want to cry in front of those people, and then you'll go cry somewhere else. That's miraculous. I thought you can't control your emotions. Well, what's happening there is, even though you have the same emotion, you're able to recognize a situation and say, you know what, now's not a good time for me to allow this reaction to manifest. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to wait. I'm not going to cry in front of this person right now. Right? Isn't that something? You have the ability, you can observe. All trauma survivors have observed. If you think about it, there are times that you've wanted to cry, but you chose not to in that moment because you just didn't feel like it was an appropriate time, or you didn't trust the person. And then you went and handled the crying later somewhere else. Or maybe you just avoided it altogether and you didn't cry. But all of these show that there is some access point of control. So your main step, and I'll give this to you as step number 1 for controlling your emotions, is going to be your pause. This is where we bring in the familiar rule of 7 seconds. Rule of 7 seconds dictates that you're going to pause 5 to 7 seconds before saying or doing anything. So the first thing I have to do when I hear that someone said something that triggers me, my subconscious automatically in 1/12 of a second computes that is out of alignment with my values. It drops cortisol in my system, and I already feel upset. I might even have some adrenaline, so now I'm feeling angry. But am I going to immediately react? No, I'm going to remember rule number 1 of emotional regulation, to pause. What does that mean? 5 to 7 seconds minimum, I will take no action. The only thing I will allow myself to do is to breathe and blink, physically speaking. I'm only going to breathe and blink. I can think as well, because I'll need to meditate. So on the outside, that's going to look like this. Did you see that? That was 7 seconds of just breathing and blinking. Can you read my emotion at that time? Not really. It's hard to know. What is this guy thinking? What is he feeling? Good. It's that way by design. Why? Because I am not seeking to give a reaction at this moment. I am breathing and I'm blinking. No physical action. Why is this so important? It saves lives. It saves reputation. It saves you from regret. Imagine if all of the men who have put their hands on their wives just paused 5 to 7 seconds like I just did. Instead of allowing the hands to start to flying. Imagine if all the moms who smack and hit their children and snatch their children up and grab them and push them and shove them and punch them just paused for 5 to 7 seconds when they felt provoked. We would save a lot of busted lips, injury, and a lot of regret. It's considered abuse to allow your hands to do what you're feeling on the inside when you're emotionally dysregulated. You can get in trouble with the law, and you can't tell the judge, I was dysregulated. He's not, jail, is not doing anything. Well, you don't understand. I had childhood trauma. It's not an excuse. It's a reason. It's not an excuse. We have the responsibility to control our actions because we have the ability to control it. Making sense? So, no, not time to start hitting, kicking, and punching people who are physically weaker than us. It's always 5 to 7 seconds minimum of just waiting. Well, what's happening while I'm waiting here? Well, inside my mind, I'm allowing my cerebral cortex to boot up, which means I'm accessing my deeper thinking. There's a scripture that says the insight of a man slows down his anger, which means when he's wise, when he's insightful, when he understands, when he has understanding, then he doesn't have a temper. Really, our temper flares up from thinking we get the situation because we just obeyed the subconscious impulse. They say one thing and you, what? Ah. All of that was because you didn't pause and just have insight. Your insight comes from the meditation, from the pausing. As I pause, I'm starting to think, I'm starting to ask questions. One of the first most important things I think about while I'm paused during that 5 to 7 seconds, especially if it was triggering, especially if I'm feeling the emotions inside of me, I've got the chemicals and they're rushing my system. One of the most important things I think about is a visualization of what the man I want to be would do in that situation. I just give myself a little flash, a little imagination of what the ideal version of myself would do at that moment. And that's what I want you to do. Once we let the floodgates open, it's hard to close them back. This is why we have to catch dysregulation before it gets out of control. In the very moment, that very second, that millisecond, that's your moment to have the trained impulse to pause and think. When you're thinking, one of the first things I want you to visualize is what type of woman you want to be in this situation. How would she handle it? And when you get that vision of serenity, you see how calm she is. You see how she doesn't yell. She doesn't raise her voice. You see how she takes the time to think, and then she says just the right thing. When you visualize that, that vision becomes powerful because it gives you a guide for what to do when you start moving and animating your body again. Because believe it or not, you're having visualizations anyway. And a lot of times the visualizations we're getting are what we saw our father do. And that's why we end up hitting our spouse. Or it's a visualization of what our mother used to do to us. And that's why we end up beating our kids. Or it's some kind of visualization of what we see in the media. And that's why we're yelling and we're screaming and we're acting all outside of our character and we got hands flailing and we're yelling. A lot of times we're getting flashes, we're getting visualizations, and we're following those visualizations instead of giving ourselves, instead of choosing for ourselves the path out of the millions of potential options. But you can't see these millions of potential options if you don't stop and freeze time. That moment when you're inside the mind meditating, you're in the quantum realm at this point. And you're able to create new reality. I kid you not. It's so powerful that people will see the way that you responded and they will say, you are so calm. I wish I could be calm like that. That was amazing. They'll be blown away by your self-control. And all you did was just apply the one technique that I gave you today. Just one technique leads you to the path of emotional regulation. Pause, minimum 5 to 7 seconds. And until you feel that you have a truly wise response, something that you'll be proud of a year from now, you don't open your mouth. You don't say anything. Even if it gets embarrassingly long and awkward. It's better to just sit here in silence. It's better. Just sit here just like this and don't say anything. It's better than saying something you regret because you felt like you had to follow a rhythm and you didn't want to make people wait and you felt awkward and you felt nervous and you felt scared. It's better to just let the awkward pause sit, even to the point that where they're asking you, hello, Amy, you in there? What's going on, Amy? Do you have anything to say? That's good. That's good. That's what you want people to say. Because you know what? They're more likely to be listening now. Your initial response 7 seconds ago, 3 minutes ago, whenever it was that you first got the trigger, that's not what they want to hear, and they weren't listening anyway. But after you pause for a while, you will find that people are very interested. There's a proverb that says, he who remains silent will be regarded as wise. Sometimes just by saying nothing, people assume you know something special. You want to be regarded as wise. So just sit through it. Feel the pain, feel the rush. Guess what? It dissipates. It dissipates very quickly when you stay calm. But if I start acting and animating and speaking or typing, if it's texting immediately, it's not going to stop the flow of the chemicals. It's going to open the floodgates. And then I'm going to really feel out of control because now I'm going down a path of saying and doing things that I regret. So I just want you to take this one tool and I want you to use it in order to regulate yourself emotionally. Do you remember the tool? It will become automatic to pause when you practice it. Rule of 7 seconds. Yep. It's going to be automatic to pause when you practice it. So get to being a lot slower at responding to everyone, everywhere, at work, coworkers, boss, children, mother, everyone, everywhere. Slow it down. and then it'll start to become natural to you.